The smile on the screen froze me in place. I stood there, in the central control room of WatchGuard security, surrounded by state-of-the-art monitors and security personnel, but everything else faded away. All that remained was the image on the main screen. My husband Michael, raising a champagne flute with a young woman in our bedroom. The bedroom I hadn't slept in for 3 days. Because I was burying my mother. I glanced at the timestamp on the screen. 2:17 p.m. The exact moment my mother's casket was being lowered into the ground. In that moment, everything became brutally clear. 12 years of marriage. All the promises, all the memories, all lies. While I stood at my mother's grave, with a broken heart, my husband was celebrating his new life with another woman. I turned to Jeremy, my technical lead, who stood motionless beside me, not daring to meet my eyes. "Save everything," I said, my voice so cold I barely recognized it. "Every second, every angle, every frame." "Yes, Mrs. Morgan. We have 72 hours to prepare." Jeremy looked at me, his expression questioning. "In the next 3 days," I said, my eyes never leaving the screen where my husband was embracing the other woman. "I have to decide. Will I destroy the man who shattered my life, or will I let him walk away and continue hurting others?" I wasn't always like this cold, calculating, ready to make the hard decisions. In fact, for most of my life, I had been too trusting, too willing to see the best in others, especially in Michael. We met 15 years ago, both working for a tech company in Portland. I was the cybersecurity director. He was the operations manager. We became friends before becoming lovers, sharing late lunches in conference rooms, working late to handle customer crises, sharing dreams about the future. When I told him about my idea to start my own security company, Michael was my biggest supporter. "You're going to change the industry," he said, his blue eyes bright with conviction, "and I'll be there to witness it." 6 months after I founded WatchGuard Security, I was the one who proposed to him. I took him to the rooftop where we had our first date, got down on one knee, and asked if he wanted to build a life with me. "I will always be by your side," he said, as he slipped the ring onto my finger. "We'll change the world together." And for a while, that seemed to be true. WatchGuard grew from a small office with 3 employees to a leading regional security firm with over 50 staff. We specialized in smart security camera systems and remote monitoring for businesses and high-end residences. Michael continued his career at Next Gen Technologies, climbing to the position of operations director. We bought a beautiful house in the Westfield neighborhood, hired an architect to design the perfect living space for both of us. From the outside looking in, we were the picture of success, professional couple, thriving careers, happy marriage. But cracks had begun to form, tiny fissures that I, with all my knowledge of security systems and intrusion detection, completely failed to notice. Perhaps it started 5 years ago, when WatchGuard won its first major security contract with the county government. I remember coming home with the news, excited and wanting to share it with Michael. But instead of the joy I expected, I found him distant, cold. "That's great news," he said, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. "Coincidentally, I was passed over for a promotion today." "I'm sorry," I said, trying to comfort him. "We can talk about it." "No, let's focus on your win," he said. "We'll talk about mine later." But we never did, and perhaps that was the problem. I was too blind, too focused on building the company, too trusting in our love to see the subtle changes happening right before my eyes. I failed to notice that each of my successes seemed to deepen an invisible wound in Michael, a wound he hid beneath a mask of support. And perhaps part of me knew. A small part, buried deep inside, felt guilty about my success. I had heard the subtle comments at parties. Michael, how does it feel to have such a successful businesswoman as your wife? Or must be tough living in Olivia's shadow, huh? I had seen how he stiffened, how his smile stretched tight when answering those questions, and instead of confronting it, I worked more. The harder it was at home, the longer I stayed at the office. I told myself I was building something important, that Michael understood, that we were fine. 6 months ago, my mother was diagnosed with terminal cancer. Catherine Morgan had always been my rock-the-strong woman, who raised 2 daughters alone after my father passed away when I was 14. She was the one who encouraged me to pursue a career in cybersecurity when few women did, who always said, "You don't have to choose between a career and happiness, Olivia. You can have both, if you find the right person to stand beside you." I thought Michael was that person. As my mother grew weaker, I tried to balance running the company and spending time with her. Michael seemed understanding, even encouraging me to spend more time with my mother. "I'll take care of everything at home," he said. "You just focus on your mom." That should have been my first clue, his sudden willingness to have me away from home after months of complaining that I worked too much. But I was grateful for his understanding. Grateful for the time with my mother. My mother, in her final days, tried to talk to me about Michael. "Something's changed in him," she said, her voice weak but her eyes still sharp. "Can't you see it?" "Michael's fine," I reassured her. "Just work stress. We both have it." She gripped my hand, her thin fingers now just skin and bone. "Don't ignore the signs just because you don't want to see them." That was the week before she died, and I didn't listen. The call came on a Tuesday morning. I was in a quarterly meeting with my management team at WatchGuard when my phone lit up with Rebecca's name. My sister rarely called during work hours unless it was an emergency. "Excuse me," I said to the team. "I need to take this call." I stepped out of the conference room and answered. "Becca? What is it?" The moment I heard my sister's soft sob, I knew. "Mom's gone," Rebecca whispered, her voice breaking. She passed in her sleep. The world around me blurred. Though we had known this was coming, though we had been preparing for weeks, the shock still left me breathless. My mother, the strong, intelligent, loving woman who had raised me, was gone. "I need to leave," I told my team when I returned to the conference room, trying to keep my voice steady. "Family emergency." "Vanessa, you're in charge." Vanessa Chin, my COO, nodded. "Of course, Olivia, we've got this. Take all the time you need." I called Michael on the drive to Rebecca's house. He answered on the second ring, his voice calm and reassuring. "I'll come home right away," he said. "I'll take care of everything here. You just focus on what you need to do for your mom and Rebecca. Don't worry about anything else." The sincerity in his voice made tears spring to my eyes. This was the Michael I had married, supportive, caring, reliable. "Thank you," I managed to say. "I love you." "Love you too," he replied. "I'll handle everything." If only I had known what everything really meant. The next few days passed in a blur of funeral arrangements, paperwork, and grief. Rebecca and I stayed together at her house, finding comfort in sorting through our mother's belongings and planning a service that would honor her vibrant spirit. Michael checked in daily, his messages filled with concern and support. "How are you holding up?" he texted. "Don't rush back. Everything's fine at home." I was grateful for his understanding, for the space to grieve without worrying about what was happening back at our house. If only I had known what "everything's fine" really meant. The day of the funeral dawned bright and clear, the kind of beautiful spring day my mother would have appreciated. The church filled with friends, family, and colleagues whose lives she had touched. I stood at the podium, somehow finding the strength to deliver a eulogy that captured her spirit, her laughter, her unwavering belief in chasing dreams no matter how impossible they seemed. "She's the reason I had the courage to start my own business," I told the gathered mourners. "She believed in me when no one else did, when even I had doubts." Michael sat in the front row, handsome in his dark suit, his expression appropriately solemn. During the burial, he stood beside me, his arm around my waist, a physical anchor as I watched my mother's casket being lowered into the ground. I leaned into him, drawing strength from his presence, completely unaware that he was already planning his exit from our marriage. "I need to take a call," he whispered as the service concluded. "Work emergency. I'll meet you at the reception." I nodded, distracted by well-wishers offering condolences. I didn't think twice about his absence as people gathered at Rebecca's house afterward, sharing stories about my mother over food and drinks. When Michael texted that he had to handle something at the office and would see me at home later, I simply sent back a heart emoji. I understood the demands of running a business. Sometimes emergencies couldn't wait, even on days like this. It was nearly 9 p.m. when I finally pulled into our driveway, emotionally exhausted from the day. The house was dark, except for a single light in the kitchen. Michael's thoughtful gesture, I assumed, so I wouldn't come home to complete darkness. I sat in the car for a moment, gathering the energy to face our empty house, to step back into regular life without my mother in it. Finally, I made my way inside, dropping my keys in the bowl by the door. Something felt different immediately, though I couldn't quite place what it was. The house smelled different, a perfume I didn't recognize, lingered in the air. In the kitchen, I found a note from Michael, saying he had been called away on an urgent business trip and would be back in a few days. "I didn't want to bother you with it today, of all days," he'd written. "Get some rest. Love you." His timing seemed odd, but I was too drained to question it. I poured myself a glass of water and headed upstairs, looking forward to a hot shower and my own bed after days at my sister's house. That's when I noticed the master bathroom door was closed, with light streaming from underneath. Michael must have left the light on, I thought. Reaching for the handle, the door opened to reveal a Strangera young woman wrapped in my towel, her hair dripping wet, obviously just out of my shower. She screamed when she saw me, clutching the towel tighter around her slender body. "Who are you?" we both demanded in unison. "I'm Olivia," I said, my voice dangerously calm despite the adrenaline surging through my veins. "I live here. This is my house." The color drained from her face, but Michael said. She stopped abruptly, realizing her mistake. "Michael said what?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. The pieces were falling into place: the unfamiliar perfume, Michael's convenient business trip, the strange feeling that things had been moved around the house. "He said his wife was gone," she stammered, backing away from me. "That you two were separated and selling the house." A hollow laugh escaped me. "Well," he lied. "We're very much married, and I've been at my mother's funeral today." Her eyes widened with genuine shock. "Funeral? He told me you were on a vacation with your boyfriend." Each word felt like another knife twisting in my chest. How long had this been going on? How many lies had he told to her and to me? "I think you should get dressed," I said coldly. "And then I think you should tell me exactly when you moved in and what else Michael has told you." As she scrambled to gather her clothes, I noticed more of her belongings scattered around my bedroom, makeup on my vanity, clothes hanging in my closet. This wasn't a one-night stand. She had moved in on the very day I was burying my mother. I walked to the window, needing air, needing space to process this betrayal. That's when I noticed it. The small security camera in the corner of the ceiling, its red light blinking steadily. The same security system I had installed in our home 3 years ago when WatchGuard launched its residential monitoring service. The same system that recorded footage to secure cloud storage that I, as the company owner, had complete access to. The same system that would have captured everything that happened in my house while I was saying goodbye to my mother. A plan began to form in my mind as I turned back to face the woman who had unknowingly stepped into the middle of what was about to become a very calculated revenge. She had no idea who she was dealing with, and neither did Michael. They would both learn soon enough. "Tell me," I said, my voice steadier now, "how much do you know about what my husband does for a living?" The woman, who reluctantly introduced herself as Victoria, clutched her clothes to her chest, her expression a mixture of fear and confusion. "He works in investments," she replied, her voice small. "He's a portfolio manager at Westbrook Financial." I couldn't help but laugh, the sound harsh even to my own ears. "Investment management? That's what he told you?" Michael wasn't a portfolio manager. He wasn't even in finance. "My husband was an operations director at a mid-sized tech company. Good job, but nowhere near as prestigious or lucrative as what he'd apparently described to his mistress." "What else did he tell you about himself?" "About us?" I asked, sitting on the edge of the bed. Despite the hurricane of emotions tearing through me, I maintained a controlled exterior. Years of business negotiations had taught me the power of appearing calm, even when you're falling apart inside. Victoria hesitated, looking toward the door as if calculating her chance of escape. "Sit down," I said, my tone leaving no room for argument. "We're going to have a conversation." Reluctantly, she perched on the armchair in the corner, still clutching her clothes like a shield. As she spoke, the full extent of Michael's deception unfolded before me, like some twisted fairy tale. According to Victoria, they'd met 6 months ago at a charity gala I'd skipped because of a major client emergency. Michael had introduced himself as a successful investment executive, recently separated from his controlling, career-obsessed wife. He claimed our marriage had been deteriorating for years, that we were already living separate lives under the same roof while we finalized the sale of our house. "He said you were barely ever home," Victoria explained, her voice growing steadier as she spoke. "That you cared more about your job than your marriage, and that you'd agreed to see other people months ago." Each fabrication felt like another betrayal, another twist of the knife. Michael had constructed an entire fictional life to seduce this woman who, I realized with a cold certainty, probably wasn't his first affair. "When did he ask you to move in?" I questioned, my mind already piecing together a timeline. "Last week," she admitted. "He said you were going away for 2 weeks with your new boyfriend, and it would be the perfect time for me to move in before the house sold. He said you'd cleared out your things already." I glanced around our bedroom, noticing for the first time that several of my personal items had indeed been removed: photos, jewelry, even some of my clothes. Michael had been systematically erasing me from our home, making space for his new life with Victoria. "Did you quit your job to move here?" I asked, a suspicion forming. Her silence confirmed it before she even spoke. "I gave notice last Friday," she finally said. "Michael said I wouldn't need to work anymore, that he'd take care of everything." Of course he did. Looking at Victoria more closely, I could see why Michael had chosen her. Young, probably mid-20s, a decade younger than me, with a kind of effortless beauty that made men like Michael feel powerful. She seemed intelligent but trusting, the type who would believe in love stories and grand romantic gestures. "Where did you live before?" I continued my questioning. "Riverside Heights," she replied, naming an area across town known for its artist community and affordable apartments. I was sharing with 2 roommates. So she had nowhere to go back to. Michael had calculated everything, ensuring she'd be completely dependent on him. The more Victoria revealed, the clearer the picture became. Michael hadn't just betrayed me with an affair. He'd been meticulously planning to replace me entirely, to step seamlessly from one life to another without consequences. "He's been lying to you," I said finally, my voice steady, despite the anger building inside me. "About everything. He doesn't work in investments. The house isn't for sale. And until about 20 minutes ago, our marriage wasn't over." Victoria's face crumpled. "But he showed me bank statements, investment portfolios." "Fabricated?" I replied simply. "Michael makes a good salary, but nothing like what he's apparently promised you." "Why would he—" she began, but stopped, realization dawning. "Oh God, I've been so stupid!" For a brief moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. But then, I remembered that while I was delivering my mother's eulogy, she was moving into my house, sleeping in my bed, planning a future with my husband. "I think you should call a friend," I said, standing up. "You need to be gone before Michael gets back." Victoria nodded, tears welling in her eyes. "I'm so sorry. I didn't know." "Save it," I cut her off. "Just get your things and go." As she hurriedly dressed and began gathering her belongings, I walked to our home office and unlocked my laptop. With a few clicks, I accessed the WatchGuard client portal and pulled up our home system. The interface showed all cameras active and recording front door, back door, main living areas, and yes, the master bedroom and bath. It was all there, time-stamped and backed up to our secure server. I scrolled back through the footage, my stomach churning as I watched Michael and Victoria enter our home earlier that day, while I was standing at my mother's grave. The cameras had captured their arrival, boxes of her belongings being carried in, and Michael giving her a tour of their new home. I forced myself to keep watching as they celebrated with champagne-ami champagne from the case I'd been saving for WatchGuard's upcoming anniversary, and then christened what Michael called their bedroom in the most intimate way possible. By the time Victoria emerged from the bedroom with a hastily packed suitcase, I had seen more than enough. I closed the laptop, a strange calm settling over me. This wasn't just about an affair anymore. It was about elaborate deception, calculated cruelty, and the complete disregard for our 12 years together. "I've called an Uber," Victoria said, her voice small. "It'll be here in 5 minutes." I nodded, standing up. "Before you go, there's something you should know." I walked her to the front door, where a small WatchGuard logo was discreetly affixed near the doorbell, something Michael had apparently never bothered to explain to her. "See this?" I pointed to the logo. "This is my company. I founded it, I run it, and every security camera in this house reports directly to servers that I control." Her eyes widened as understanding dawned. "You mean everything that happened here today? Everything is recorded? And unlike what my husband told you, I'm not some workaholic wife he's outgrown. I built a security empire from nothing, and I know exactly how to use it." The color drained from her face. "What are you going to do?" Before I could answer, headlights swept across the front of the house. Michael's car pulled into the driveway, returning far earlier than expected. "Looks like we're about to find out," I said, a cold smile forming on my lips as I opened the front door, positioning myself so that Michael would see both of us standing there. Victoria with her suitcase, me with my newfound knowledge of his betrayal. As he stepped out of his car, the look of shock on his face confirmed what I already knew. He never expected to get caught. He never expected me to come home early. And he certainly never expected to face consequences for what he'd done. But I was about to show him exactly who he was dealing with. This was just the beginning. The moment froze in time, Michael standing in the driveway, car door still open, briefcase in hand, Victoria beside me with her hastily packed suitcase, and me standing in the doorway of the home we'd built together. the weight of betrayal crushing against my ribs. Michael recovered quickly, his face shifting from shock to calculated charm in seconds of transformation. I'd seen countless times in business meetings and social gatherings the chameleon-like ability to adapt that had once made me proud to call him my husband. "Olivia," he said, his voice gentle as he approached. "You're home early. I wasn't expecting you until tomorrow." The audacity of his calm demeanor sent ice through my veins. He was still trying to control the situation, to smooth over the catastrophic collision of his two separate lives. "Clearly," I replied, my voice steady despite the tremor I felt in my limbs. Michael's eyes darted to Victoria, silently communicating something I couldn't decipher. I stepped slightly in front of her, blocking their visual connection. "Don't worry about looking to her for help," I said. "Victoria and I have been having quite the chat about your investment career." His face paled slightly, but the smile remained fixed in place as he climbed the steps to the porch. "Olivia, I can explain everything," he began, using the soothing tone that had diffused 100 arguments in the past. "This isn't what it looks like. Save it." I cut him off. "I've seen the footage." That stopped him cold. "What footage?" I gestured to the small camera mounted discreetly above the front door. "Did you forget who I am? What I do? Every camera in this house has been recording since the day we installed the system. I've seen everything, Michael. Everything." His confident facade cracked, revealing a flash of genuine fear before he recovered. "Olivia, please, let's talk about this inside. Privately." He glanced meaningfully at Victoria. "No," I said firmly. "There's nothing to discuss. Victoria is leaving. You've lied to her just as thoroughly as you've lied to me. And you," I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "You need to pack a bag and get out too." "This is my house," he countered, steel entering his voice. "My name is on the mortgage." A bitter laugh escaped me, along with mine. "But more importantly, my company's security system has footage of you moving your mistress into our home while I was burying my mother. Do you really want to test how that will play out legally?" Before Michael could respond, the distant headlights of Victoria's Uber appeared at the end of our street. She shifted uncomfortably beside me, clutching her suitcase like a lifeline. "That's my ride," she murmured. "Go," I told her, not unkindly. Despite everything, I recognized that she too had been manipulated by Michael's lies. "This isn't your fight." Victoria gave a quick nod, brushing past Michael without meeting his eyes as she hurried down the walkway. He made no move to stop her, his focus entirely on me calculating, assessing the damage, planning his next move. When the car pulled away, we were left alone in the heavy silence. I stepped back into the house, leaving the door open. After a moment's hesitation, Michael followed, closing it quietly behind him. The facade was completely gone now. In its place was a cold anger I'd rarely seen directed at me in our years together. "You had no right to send her away," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "You had no right to come back early without telling me." The absurdity of his accusation might have been comical under different circumstances. I had no right to come back to my own home after burying my mother. "You know what I mean," he snapped. "We had an arrangement." "No, Michael," I said, my own anger rising to match his. "You had a fantasia delusion that you could replace me with a younger model and step into some fictional life you created. There was never any arrangement." He ran a hand through his hair, frustration radiating from him in waves. "This marriage has been dead for years, and you know it. You're never here. You care more about your precious company than you do about us." There it was, the familiar refrain. The narrative he'd clearly been refining for months, perhaps years. The same story he'd fed to Victoria, now served up to me as justification. "Is that the story you've been telling yourself?" I asked quietly. "That I forced you into this? That I drove you to lie, to cheat, to move another woman into our home on the day of my mother's funeral? You weren't supposed to be home, he exploded, then immediately seemed to regret the outburst. I mean, the timing was unfortunate. Unfortunate, I echoed, disbelief coloring my voice. Tell me what exactly was unfortunate. That while I was grieving, you were celebrating with champagne in our bedroom? That you've been systematically removing my things from our home? That you fabricated an entire career to impress your girlfriend? His eyes widened slightly at the last part. How much did she tell you? Everything, I replied, though in truth, I suspected there was much more I hadn't yet uncovered. Westbrook Financial, Portfolio Management. The fictitious separated husband with the cold, career-obsessed wife. Michael's jaw tightened. It wasn't entirely fiction. I felt the blow as if he'd physically struck me. 12 years of marriage, of building a life together, dismissed so casually. I took a deep breath, refusing to let him see how deeply his words cut. I built my company from nothing, I said quietly. You used to be proud of that. You used to tell people how amazing it was, what I'd accomplished. That was before it took over your life, he countered. Before you missed every dinner, every vacation, every chance to be a real couple. I shook my head, memories flooding back late nights at the office. Yes, but also Michael's gradual withdrawal, his increasing disinterest in my work, the subtle criticisms that had grown more frequent over the years. I was building something, I said, something that would secure our future. And you were right there with me, encouraging me every step of the way. When did that change, Michael? When did you decide that my success was a threat rather than something to celebrate? He didn't answer immediately, his gaze dropping to the floor. When he finally spoke, his voice was different, quieter, almost resigned. I don't know. Maybe when I realized I was always going to be Olivia's husband instead of my own person. Maybe when I saw you outgrowing me, out-earning me, outshining me at every turn. The raw honesty surprised me, momentarily cutting through my anger. This was the real betrayal, not just the affair or the lies, but the festering resentment he'd hidden behind a supportive facade. So instead of talking to me, instead of working through it, you decided to create this elaborate fiction? To plan a complete life replacement while pretending everything was fine? Michael moved to the living room, sinking onto the couch we'd chosen together years ago. It just happened. Victoria was uncomplicated. She looked at me like I was important. And you couldn't resist playing the big shot investment banker, I added, the pieces clicking into place, the successful man with the cold, absent wife. It must have been intoxicating to reinvent himself. He didn't deny it, which was answer enough. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of 12 years and countless lies hanging between us. I want you out of this house tonight, I finally said. Take what you need for a few days. We can figure out the rest later. And if I refuse? He challenged, a hint of his earlier defiance returning. I met his gaze steadily. Then I call my security team and have them physically remove you. Then I contact a lawyer and provide them with footage of you moving your mistress into our home while I was at my mother's funeral. Then I make sure every mutual friend, every colleague, and every family member knows exactly what you did and when you did it. The color drained from his face. You wouldn't. Try me, I replied, my voice ice. You have no idea what I'm capable of right now. Michael left an hour later with a duffel bag and a tight expression that mixed anger with something that might have been fear. As the front door closed behind him, the house fell into a heavy silence. I stood motionless in the entryway, waiting for the emotional collapse that seemed inevitable. The tears, the screaming, The breakdown that should follow, discovering your husband's betrayal on the same day you buried your mother. But it didn't come. Instead, a strange, cold clarity settled over me. I moved through the house methodically, cataloging evidence of Victoria's brief residenza scarf draped over a chair, a novel on the coffee table, a bottle of perfume in the bathroom. In our bedroom, I found several empty spaces in my closet where my clothes should have been, confirming that Michael had indeed been systematically removing my presence. I sat on the edge of the boudoir bed, where hours earlier Michael and Victoria had christened their new beginning. The thought sent a fresh wave of nausea through me. Reaching for my phone, I called the one person I knew I could trust. "Vanessa? It's Olivia. I need a favor." Within an hour, 2 of WatchGuard's most discreet security specialists were at my house, efficiently changing every lock, reprogramming the security system, and conducting a thorough sweep for anything Michael might have left behind. As they worked, I sat at my desk, methodically downloading and backing up every second of footage from the past week. The evidence of Michael's betrayal was safely archived, ready if I needed it. My emotional processing would have to wait. Right now, I needed to secure my home, my business, and my future. By the time dawn broke, I had a new security protocol in place, a consultation scheduled with the city's most ruthless divorce attorney, and a determination that had replaced the initial shock and pain. Michael thought he could discard me for a newer model, erase me from my own home while I was at my most vulnerable. He was about to learn how catastrophically he had underestimated the woman he married. The next morning, I woke up alone in my bed for the first time in years. The house felt different, emptier, but somehow lighter, too, as if a weight had been lifted. I'd slept surprisingly well, the exhaustion of grief and betrayal pulling me under despite everything that had happened. As I stood in the shower, letting hot water wash over me, memories flooded back not just of yesterday's nightmare, but of the journey that had brought me here. How had we gone from being partners, best friends, lovers, to this? The signs had been there, I realized now, but I'd been too busy, too trusting, too certain of our foundation to see them. Michael and I had met at a tech startup where we both worked fresh out of college, hay in operations, me in IT security. We'd connected over late-night debugging sessions and shared takeout dinners, bonding over similar backgrounds and ambitions. He'd been my biggest cheerleader when I first floated the idea of starting my own security firm, spending countless nights helping me refine my business plan and pitch deck. "You're going to be amazing," he'd said the night before my first investor meeting. "They'd be fools not to fund you." 6 months later, with seed funding secured and my first small office leased, I'd proposed to him. It wasn't traditional, but neither was our relationship. I'd taken him to the rooftop where we'd had our first kiss and asked if he'd build a life with me. "I want a partner," I told him. "Someone who celebrates my wins and helps me through my losses. Someone who isn't threatened by my ambition but inspired by it." He'd said yes without hesitation, pulling me into his arms and spinning me around the rooftop. "We're going to take on the world together," he'd promised. For the first few years, that promise had held true. While I built WatchGuard from a 3-person operation into a growing regional player, Michael supported me through every setback and celebrated every victory. He'd been there for the first major contract signing, bringing champagne to the office and taking the entire tiny team out to dinner. He'd held me through the night when our biggest early client unexpectedly dropped us, assuring me that it was their loss and we'd bounce back stronger. When had that changed? I tried to pinpoint the moment, the turning point when his support had begun to curdle into resentment. Maybe it was 5 years ago, when WatchGuard landed our first government contract, a security overhaul for county buildings that put us on the map as a serious contender. I remembered coming home ecstatic, wanting to share the news with Michael, only to find him distant, congratulating me with a perfunctory kiss before mentioning that he'd been passed over for a promotion that same day. "It's fine," he'd said when I tried to talk about it. "Let's focus on your win instead." But we never really had focused on his loss, had we? I'd been so caught up in the whirlwind of scaling the business that I'd accepted his dismissal at face value, failing to see the seed of resentment taking root. Or perhaps it was 3 years ago, when I was featured in a regional business magazine as one of the top 40 under 40 entrepreneurs. The article had emphasized my journey, the challenges I'd overcome as a woman in the male-dominated security industry. There had been a photo spread of me in my office, looking confident and powerful. Michael hadn't attended the reception, claiming a migraine. When I'd brought home the magazine, excited to show him, he'd flipped through it quickly and set it aside. "They didn't even mention that you're married," he commented, his tone light but his eyes hard. "It was about business leaders, not personal lives," I'd replied, confused by his reaction. "Right, just business." The comment had stung, but I'd brushed it off as momentary jealousy. We were partners after all. We supported each other's successes. Except, as I stood in the shower now, the hot water beating against my skin, I realized we hadn't been partners for a long time. Somewhere along the way, Michael had stopped seeing us as a team and started seeing us as competitors. My success had become his failure, my growth, his stagnation. I stepped out of the shower, wrapping myself in a plush towelone that thankfully didn't carry the scent of Victoria's perfume. As I wiped the steam from the mirror, I studied my reflection. The woman staring back at me looked tired. Yes, but also strangely composed. I'd expected to see devastation in my eyes, but instead, there was a steely determination. Eleanor Wright's office was exactly what I expected from the city's most formidable divorce attorney, elegant, understated, and quietly intimidating. The walls were lined with law degrees and professional accolades, and the woman herself matched her surroundings perfectly. In her mid-50s with silver-streaked dark hair and penetrating eyes, she radiated competence and control. "Mrs. Morgan," she greeted me, extending a hand. "Please, have a seat." "Miss Morgan," I corrected automatically. I never took my husband's name professionally. A hint of approval flickered across her face. "Miss Morgan, then. I understand from our brief call that you're dealing with a particularly difficult situation." For the next 20 minutes, I laid out the facts. My mother's death, Michael's betrayal, the security footage that had captured it all. Eleanor listened without interruption, occasionally making notes in a sleek leather portfolio. "The timing is especially egregious," she commented when I finished. "Moving his mistress in during your mother's funeral shows a level of callousness that any judge would find troubling." "Does that matter legally?" I asked. "Infidelity itself rarely impacts financial settlements in our state," she explained, "but the manner and timing of it can influence a judge's perception of character and decision-making. And the fact that you have video evidence changes the equation considerably." She leaned forward slightly. "Most affairs are denied or minimized in divorce proceedings. Your husband won't have that luxury." I felt a strange satisfaction at her words. Michael couldn't spin this, couldn't minimize what he'd done, or claim it was a momentary lapse. The evidence was irrefutable. "Let's discuss your financial situation," Eleanor continued. "You mentioned you own a security company?" "WatchGuard Security," I confirmed. "I founded it 8 years ago. It's entirely separate from any marital assets. I started it before we were married, and the company has always maintained its own accounts and financial structure." Eleanor nodded, making another note. "That's helpful. What about your home?" "Purchased together 5 years ago. We are both on the mortgage and deed." "Joint bank accounts?" "One for household expenses, but our primary accounts are separate. I've always maintained financial independence." Smart, she remarked. Many of my clients find themselves financially vulnerable during divorce because they've integrated everything. We spent the next hour going through the details, assets, accounts, potential points of contention. Throughout the conversation, I felt my resolve strengthening. This wasn't just about ending a marriage anymore. It was about reclaiming my life and ensuring Michael faced consequences for his actions. There's one more thing, I said as our meeting was winding down. Michael works for Next Gen Technologies. I'm not sure if that matters, but Eleanor's expression sharpened. Next Gen is one of our clients, not Michael specifically, but the company uses our firm for various legal matters. Is that a problem? I asked, concerned about a potential conflict of interest. Not for you, she replied with a small smile. It means I have certain insights into company policies that might be useful. For instance, I know that NextGen has a strict morality clause in their executive contracts. Public embarrassment of the company is grounds for termination. The implication was clear. If Michael's behavior became public knowledge, his job could be at risk. I felt a momentary hesitation. Did I really want to go that far? Then I remembered the champagne toast in our bedroom, the systematic removal of my belongings, the calculated cruelty of timing it all around my mother's funeral. I understand, I said quietly. I'm not suggesting we take that approach immediately, Eleanor clarified. But it's leverage you should be aware of. Sometimes, the mere possibility is enough to encourage a reasonable settlement. As I left her office with a folder of paperwork to complete, I felt strangely empowered. The fog of shock and betrayal was lifting, replaced by a clearer-eyed determination to ensure Michael didn't simply walk away unscathed. Back in my car, I checked my phone to find 3 missed calls from Michael and a text message. You're not answering my calls. This isn't like you, Olivia. We need to talk like adults. The condescension in his tone was palpable even through textaways, the reasonable one, positioning me as emotional and irrational. It was a tactic he'd employed throughout our marriage whenever we disagreed, presenting himself as the calm, logical party, while framing my perspective as overly emotional. I didn't bother responding. Instead, I called Vanessa. How's the office running? I asked when she answered. Everything's under control, she assured me. Though the Westlake contract needs your sign-off before Friday. I'll come in tomorrow, I decided. Work had always been my sanctuary, the place where I felt most competent and in control. Right now, I needed that grounding. Are you sure? No one expects you back so soon after your mother's... I need it, Vanessa, I interrupted gently. Sitting at home just gives me too much time to think. She understood immediately. I'll have everything ready for you. And Olivia, the team knows something's happened. Not the details, but they know you're going through a rough time. They're worried about you. The simple statement brought unexpected tears to my eyes. While Michael had been constructing narratives about my cold, workaholic nature, I'd built a company where people genuinely cared about each other's well-being. Thank you, I managed. I'll see you tomorrow. On the drive home, I took a detour, finding myself pulling into the parking lot of Riverside Park, a place my mother had loved. We'd spent countless Sunday afternoons here when I was growing up, feeding ducks and talking about everything and nothing. After I started WatchGuard, we'd continued the tradition whenever our schedules allowed, walking the riverside path while I bounced business ideas off her. I made my way to our favorite bench overlooking the water. The late afternoon sun cast golden light across the river's surface, and for a moment I could almost feel my mother beside me. I wish you were here, I whispered. I could use your advice, right now. But even as I said it, I knew what she would tell me. My mother had always been my strongest advocate, the one who taught me to stand my ground and never let anyone diminish my worth. Never make yourself smaller to make someone else feel bigger, she told me once when I was hesitating about applying to competitive tech programs dominated by men. The right people will celebrate your light, not try to dim it. Michael had celebrated my light once. Somewhere along the way, he'd started resenting its brightness instead. As I sat by the river, I felt a shift within me, grief for my mother, mingling with grief for my marriage. But beneath it all, a bedrock of strength she had helped instill in me. I wasn't going to let Michael's betrayal define me or diminish what I'd built. My phone buzzed again, another text from Michael. I'm at the house. Where are you? We need to talk about this like rational people. At the house? After I'd explicitly told him to leave and change the locks? The audacity was breathtaking. I called Tony, my head of security, immediately. Michael's at the house, I said without preamble. On it, he replied. A moment later, he's at the front door, trying his key. Looks frustrated that it's not working. Of course he was. Michael had never truly accepted that rules applied to him. Can you send someone over? Already dispatching a team. 2 minutes out. Tell them not to be gentle, I added, surprising myself with the steel in my voice. While I waited for confirmation that the situation was handled, I sat with my new resolve. This wasn't a woman scorned seeking vengeance. This was a businesswoman protecting her assets. A daughter honoring her mother's legacy of strength, a person refusing to be erased. 10 minutes later, Tony called back. Situation resolved, he reported. Michael left the premises after our team explained the trespassing laws. He wasn't happy, but he wasn't stupid enough to escalate with 2 security professionals present. Did he say what he wanted? Claimed he needed to retrieve important work documents from his home office. Our guys explained that he could arrange to collect his belongings through proper legal channels. I closed my eyes, imagining the scene. Michael, always so carefully put together, facing the reality that his actions had consequences, that I wasn't going to roll over and make this easy for him. Thank you, Tony. I appreciate it. No problem, boss. That's what we're here for. As I drove home, I felt a strange sense of calm. The initial crushing pain of betrayal was transforming into something else, not forgiveness, certainly, but a focused determination to move forward on my own terms. When I arrived home, I checked the security footage from earlier. There was Michael, standing on our front porch, irritation clear on his face as he realized his key no longer worked. The entitled expectation in his stance, the assumption that he could simply return whenever he wanted, despite what he'd done. It all confirmed I was making the right choice. I spent the evening organizing paperwork for Eleanor, securing financial documents, and making lists of shared assets. The methodical work kept my mind focused, preventing it from spiraling into the emotional abyss that kept threatening. Around 9, my doorbell rang. The security app on my phone showed Rebecca standing on my porch, an overnight bag in one hand and a bottle of wine in the other. I know you said not to come, she announced when I opened the door, but I decided that was ridiculous. You shouldn't be alone right now. For the first time since discovering Victoria in my bathroom, I felt the tension in my shoulders release slightly. I'm really glad you're here. We settled in the living room with glasses of wine and the comfort of sisterhood. Rebecca had always been my fiercest protector, even when we were children. Have you heard from him again? She asked after I filled her in on the day's events. He showed up here earlier. Security turned him away. Rebecca's eyes widened. He had the nerve to come back after what he did? Michael's always believed he could charm his way out of any situation, I said, finding clarity as I spoke. He's never faced real consequences for his actions. Until now, Rebecca added, raising her glass in a grim toast. Until now, I agreed, clinking my glass against hers. Later that night, as Rebecca slept in the guest room, I sat in my home office reviewing the security footage again. There was something I needed to send at the betrayal itself, which was seared into my memory, but something specific from the day of my mother's funeral. I found it quickly. Michael standing beside me at the graveside, his arm around my waist in what appeared to be a gesture of support. But now, looking closer, I could see his free hand checking his phone, his attention already elsewhere while I grieved. Even in that sacred moment, he had been planning his escape, coordinating with Victoria, orchestrating his new beginning while standing beside me at an ending. The footage should have hurt, should have twisted the knife deeper. Instead, it crystallized my resolve. This wasn't a man who deserved my tears or my mercy. This was a man who had calculated his betrayal down to the minute, taking advantage of my most vulnerable moment to pursue his selfish desires. I downloaded the clip, adding it to the growing file of evidence I was compiling. Then I closed my laptop and went to bed, sleeping soundly for the first time since my world had imploded. In the morning, I woke with a clear sense of purpose. The path forward wasn't easy, but it was becoming clearer. Michael had underestimated me once, assuming I would either never discover his betrayal or would be too devastated to fight back effectively. He was about to discover just how badly he had miscalculated. My return to Watchguard the next morning felt like stepping into a different world, one where I was respected, competent, and in control. The sleek glass building that housed our headquarters had always filled me with pride, but today it felt like a sanctuary. As I walked through the lobby, our receptionist Deborah looked up in surprise. "Miss Morgan, we weren't expecting you back so soon." "Some things can't wait," I replied with a small smile. "How's everything running?" "Smoothly. Vanessa's been handling the client calls, and the team stepped up for the Riverside presentation yesterday." She hesitated before adding, "We're all so sorry about your mother." I nodded, touched by her sincerity. "Thank you, Deborah. That means a lot." In the elevator up to our executive floor, I took a deep breath, centering myself. For the next few hours, I would focus exclusively on work, no thoughts of Michael, Victoria, or the ruins of my personal life. Vanessa was waiting at my office door, tablet in hand. "I didn't expect you this early," she said, falling into step beside me. "The team meeting isn't until 10. "I needed to get out of the house," I admitted, settling behind my desk. The familiar space ergonomic chair, dual monitors, the small potted succulent my mother had given me when I signed the lease on this building, felt comfortingly normal. Catch me up on everything I've missed. For the next hour, we reviewed client updates, project timelines, and the pending Westlake contract. The work absorbed me completely, providing respite from emotional turmoil. This was where I excelled, where I could solve problems with clear-headed strategy rather than navigate the murky waters of betrayal and loss. When Vanessa finally ran out of updates, she hesitated, clearly wanting to say something more. "What is it?" I prompted. "I'm not sure if this is the right time, but there's been a development with next-gen tech." My attention sharpened immediately. Michael's company. "They've requested a meeting to discuss expanding their security package," Vanessa continued. "Specifically, they want to add personal security monitoring for their executive team." The irony wasn't lost on me. Michael's company wanted to expand into personal security, the very thing that had captured his betrayal. "When's the meeting?" "Friday at 2 o'clock. I can handle it if you prefer." "No," I cut in. "A plan already forming. I'll take it personally." Vanessa looked uncertain. "Are you sure that's a good idea, given the situation with Michael?" "It's precisely because of the situation with Michael that I need to be there," I explained. "This is business, and I won't let personal matters interfere with a potential contract expansion." The determined set of my jaw must have convinced her because Vanessa simply nodded. "I'll set it up. Their chief technology officer, Jonathan Hayes, will be leading from their side." "Jonathan," I knew him vaguely from company functions, a serious, competent man who had always treated me with professional respect. Unlike some of Michael's other colleagues who tended to view me as Michael's wife rather than a successful business owner in my own right. Perfect, I said, already strategizing. Have the team prepare a comprehensive proposal. I want options for everything from basic home monitoring to full executive protection. After Vanessa left, I stared thoughtfully at my computer screen. The next-gen meeting wasn't just a business opportunity, it was potential leverage. If I impressed their CTO, if I secured an expanded contract right under Michael's nose, the message would be clear. I wasn't broken by his betrayal, I was thriving despite it. The team meeting at 10 went smoothly, with my staff professionals hiding any surprise at my quick return behind supportive smiles and focused questions. I found myself genuinely engaged, appreciating their competence and loyalty in a way I perhaps hadn't fully acknowledged before. Before we wrap up, I said as the meeting concluded, I want to thank all of you for keeping everything running while I dealt with my mother's passing. It means more than you know to have a team I can count on. The simple acknowledgement seemed to resonate deeply, with several team members visibly moved. In that moment, I realized how false Michael's narrative had been. I wasn't some cold workaholic who neglected relationships. I had built meaningful connections here, created a company culture of mutual respect and support. Back in my office, I turned my attention to the divorce proceedings. Eleanor had emailed a detailed asset worksheet that needed completion before our next meeting. I worked methodically through it, documenting our financial entanglements with clinical precision. Joint checking account, $8,432. 21 house value, current estimate, $765,000 with $420,000 remaining on the mortgage. Retirement accounts, separate. Though we'd each named the other as beneficiary vehicles, my Range Rover, paid off, his Tesla, financed. As I cataloged our life together in dollars and cents, I felt a strange detachment, as if I were analyzing a business dissolution rather than the end of a 12-year marriage. Perhaps that was healthier, I reasoned. Emotion would only cloud my judgment, and I needed absolute clarity now. My phone buzzed with a text from Michael. Olivia, this has gone far enough. I've retained counsel. You need to stop freezing me out of my own home. Let's discuss this like reasonable adults before lawyers make it uglier than it needs to be. His persistent framing of himself as the reasonable party, while characterizing my actions as excessive or emotional, was so transparent now. I forwarded the message to Eleanor without responding to him directly. At noon, I called Rebecca to check in. How was your morning? She asked. Productive, I replied. Being at work helps. How are things at the house? Quiet. I'm going through Mom's photo albums like we talked about. Her voice softened. Found some great ones of you in your coding camp phase, complete with the purple hair streak. The memory made me smile despite everything. Mom hated that hair. She got over it when you won that scholarship. Rebecca paused. I miss her, Liv. Me too, I said quietly. The double grief for my mother and my marriage felt momentarily overwhelming. Any word from Michael? Rebecca asked, changing the subject. Just more texts trying to position himself as the rational one. I hesitated before adding, I might have an opportunity to secure a major contract with his company. Rebecca let out a low whistle. That would certainly send a message. It's not about sending messages, I corrected, though we both knew that wasn't entirely true. It's about not letting personal matters impact business opportunities. Uh-huh, Rebecca replied, unconvinced. Well, whatever your motivation, I fully support you getting a big fat contract from his company right now. After we hung up, I spent the afternoon in strategic planning sessions for the next-gen proposal. Every detail needed to be perfect, not just because it was good business, but because it was personal in a way I couldn't entirely separate. By late afternoon, I was reviewing security footage from a client's warehouse when Deborah buzzed my office. "Miss Morgan, there's someone here to see you. She doesn't have an appointment, but she's very insistent." A prickle of unease ran down my spine. "Who is it?" "She says her name is Victoria Cooper." Victoria, Michael's mistress, here at my company. "Send her up," I decided after a moment's consideration. This confrontation was inevitable, and I preferred to have it on my turf, where I was most confident. 5 minutes later, Victoria stood in my office doorway, looking considerably different from the frightened woman I'd found in my bathroom. Her hair was pulled back in a neat ponytail, and she wore a simple blouse and jeans, professional but casual. The fear in her eyes had been replaced by determination. "Thank you for seeing me," she said, remaining standing until I gestured to the chair across from my desk. "What can I do for you, Victoria?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. She took a deep breath, clearly gathering courage. I wanted to apologize properly. What happened, what Michael and I did, was inexcusable. I studied her face, looking for signs of manipulation or insincerity. I found none, just a young woman who seemed genuinely remorseful. "Why are you here?" I asked directly. "Did Michael send you to plead his case?" "No," she said quickly. "He doesn't know I'm here. We're not speaking anymore." That surprised me. "What happened?" "Reality happened," she replied with a hint of bitterness. "After I left your house that night, I started really thinking about everything, all the lies he told me, how easily he manipulated both of us. I realized I didn't even know who he really was." I remained silent, waiting for her to continue. "I called him the next day to end things," she explained. "He tried to convince me that we could still be together, that once the divorce was settled, we'd have our fresh start." She shook her head. "But I kept thinking about how cruelly he spoke about you, how he timed everything around your mother's funeral, how he systematically erased you from your own home." Her words hit me with unexpected force. Hearing Michael's actions described by someone else, someone who had initially been complicit, but was now clearly repelled, somehow validated my own horror. I realized that anyone who could be that calculating with someone they'd supposedly loved for years would eventually do the same to me, Victoria continued, and I wanted no part of it. "So again, why are you here?" I pressed, not yet ready to show any warmth. Victoria reached into her bag and pulled out a small USB drive, placing it on my desk. "Because you deserve to know everything. This has all of our text messages, emails, everything from the past 6 months, including his plans for replacing you, his discussions about your company, and his," she hesitated, "his strategies for hiding assets before filing for divorce." I stared at the small device, understanding immediately what a powerful piece of evidence it represented. "Why would you give me this?" "Because it's the right thing to do," she said simply. "And because I was raised better than to be the other woman, especially to someone who just lost her mother." Her eyes filled with genuine regret. "I know it doesn't fix anything, but I hope it helps you protect yourself." I picked up the USB drive, turning it over in my fingers. "Did he mention anything specific about WatchGuard in these messages?" Victoria nodded. "He talked about how he could use connections from your client list to start his own consulting business. Said he'd been gathering intelligence for months." The revelation sent ice through my veins. Not only had Michael been planning to leave me, he'd been preparing to compete with me using information he'd gained through our relationship. The betrayal went beyond personal into professional territory, something I couldn't overlook. "Thank you for bringing this to me," I said, my mind already racing with the implications. It was unexpected. Victoria stood, clearly sensing our conversation was concluding. I know you have no reason to believe anything I say, but I truly am sorry. I got caught up in a fantasy he created, and I didn't stop to think about who was getting hurt. As she turned to leave, a question occurred to me. Victoria, why did you quit your job before moving in? That seems like a big risk for a new relationship. She paused in the doorway, a flash of embarrassment crossing her face. Michael told me that once we were living together, I wouldn't need to work. He said he had a trust fund that was about to mature, and we'd be set for life within a few months. She gave a rueful smile, another lie in a long list of them. After she left, I sat quietly, absorbing everything she had shared. The USB drive felt heavy in my hand, a digital record of Michael's calculated betrayal and potential threat to my business. I connected it to my secure testing laptop, running a virus scan before exploring its contents. The messages were damning months of communication, showing Michael's methodical planning, his disdain for me and our marriage, and most alarmingly, his plans to leverage information about WatchGuard's clients and security protocols for his own benefit. In one exchange from just 2 weeks earlier, he'd written, "Once I'm out, I'll have everything I need to approach Westlake and Riverstone with a competing offer. Olivia's been so transparent about their security needs, it'll be like taking candy from a baby." Westlake and Riverstone, two of our biggest clients, representing nearly 30% of our annual revenue. I forwarded the most incriminating messages to Eleanor, adding a note about Victoria's unexpected visit. Then I called Tony into my office. "I need a comprehensive security audit," I told him, keeping my voice steady despite my racing heart. "Full system review, client portal access logs, everything. I need to know if anyone's been accessing information they shouldn't have." Tony's expression turned serious. "Breach concern? Possible corporate espionage," I confirmed. "Priority 1. After he left to assemble a team, I sat back in my chair, a plan crystallizing in my mind. Michael hadn't just betrayed me as a husband. He'd attempted to undermine the company I'd built from nothing. The personal betrayal had nearly broken me, but this threat to WatchGuard, the livelihood of 50 employees who depended on Meg, ignited something else entirely. This wasn't just about surviving a divorce anymore. This was about protecting everything I'd built from someone who thought he could simply take what he wanted without consequences. I picked up my phone and called Eleanor. "I have new information," I said when she answered, "and I'm ready to take the gloves off." By Friday morning, the pieces of my counteroffensive were falling into place. Tony's security audit had confirmed my worst fears. Michael had indeed been accessing confidential client information through my home network, carefully covering his tracks but leaving just enough digital fingerprints for our forensic team to trace. "He's good, but not as good as he thinks," Tony explained, walking me through the findings. "Found evidence he's been downloading client contracts, security protocols, even our pricing structures." "For how long?" I asked, my stomach tightening. "Based on the logs, about 8 months. Escalating in the past 3. 8 months while I'd been grieving my mother's terminal diagnosis, planning for her care, and trying to maintain some semblance of normalcy at home and work. Michael had been systematically gathering ammunition to use against me and my company. Can we prove it was him? I needed to be certain before proceeding." Tony nodded grimly. "Timestamps match when you were at the office or traveling for work. And we found a cached email on your home server where he was sending documents to a private account. It's him, all right." I thanked Tony and his team, then immediately called Eleanor to update her. Her response was measured, but confident. "This changes the equation significantly," she said. "We're no longer just dealing with divorce proceedings, but potential intellectual property theft and corporate espionage. I've brought in a colleague who specializes in business litigation." "What's our next move?" I asked. We document everything and prepare for a two-pronged approach. In the divorce, we use this as leverage to secure a more favorable settlement. For the business side, we prepare cease and desist orders and possibly an injunction. And the next-gen meeting today? The irony of meeting with Michael's company while uncovering his plot against mine wasn't lost on me. Proceed as planned, Eleanor advised. No indication of hostile action yet, but be prepared. If we move against Michael legally, his employer will eventually become aware of the situation. After hanging up, I prepared for the next-gen meeting with renewed purpose. What had started as a desire to prove my resilience had transformed into a strategic necessity. Securing this contract wouldn't just be personally satisfying, it would strengthen WatchGuard's position against whatever Michael was planning. The meeting was scheduled for our largest conference room, with Jonathan Hayes and 2 other next-gen executives expected. I arrived early, reviewing our proposal one last time and centering myself for what was certain to be a delicate balancing act. Vanessa joined me, sensing my tension. "Everything okay?" "Just focused," I replied, not ready to share the full extent of Michael's betrayal. "This contract is important." She squeezed my shoulder gently. "You've got this. No one does security better than you." The next-gen team arrived precisely at 2, Jonathan Hayes leading the way, followed by their head of operations and chief financial officer. Conspicuously absent was Michael, who as operations director would normally attend such meetings. I couldn't decide if his absence was a relief or a disappointment. "Miss Morgan," Jonathan greeted me with a firm handshake. "Thank you for making time for us. I know it's been a difficult week for you." I raised an eyebrow, wondering how much he knew. "I was sorry to hear about your mother's passing," he clarified, seemingly genuine. "Michael mentioned it at our Monday staff meeting. Of course he had never the concerned husband in public, even as he plotted to replace me in private." "Thank you," I replied simply. "Shall we get started?" The meeting proceeded smoothly, with my team presenting our comprehensive security package for NextGen's executive staff. The proposal included home security systems, personal device protection, and travel security protocols, all areas where WatchGuard excelled. Jonathan and his team were attentive and engaged, asking detailed questions about implementation timelines and technical specifications. As we moved into the financial portion of the presentation, the CFO leaned forward with particular interest. "These monitoring packages, they're significantly more robust than what we've seen from other vendors. We pride ourselves on comprehensive protection," I explained. "Our systems don't just record intrusions, they predict and prevent them." "And the data?" Jonathan asked. "How secure is it?" I met his gaze directly. "Every piece of information is encrypted and stored on our private servers. No third-party access, no cloud vulnerabilities. We protect your security data with the same rigor we apply to government contracts." The implied comparison to our government work wasn't subtle, and I could see it had the desired effect. The next-gen executives exchanged impressed glances. "And you personally oversee the security protocols?" Jonathan continued. "I designed them," I confirmed. "Every client receives customized protection based on their specific vulnerability profile, nothing off the shelf." As the meeting concluded, I could sense we'd made an impact. Jonathan lingered after his colleagues left, clearly wanting a private word. "I have to say, Olivia, your reputation is well-deserved," he said once we were alone. "Michael's always spoken highly of your work, but I'm even more impressed having seen your operation firsthand." The mention of Michael's apparent praise surprised me. "Has he?" Jonathan nodded, a curious expression crossing his face. "Always. Though recently, he's been." He paused, seemingly weighing whether to continue. "He's been what?" I prompted. "Different, distracted, secretive about some personal project he's working on." My pulse quickened, but I kept my expression neutral. People go through phases, I offered non-committally. True, Jonathan agreed, though in Michael's case, I'm concerned it's affecting his work. He missed a major deadline last week, something completely out of character for him. The timing aligned perfectly with when he'd moved Victoria into our home. I felt a grim satisfaction knowing his personal betrayal was already having professional consequences. I'm sure he'll sort it out, I said, gathering my materials. In the meantime, we'd be delighted to implement NextGen's executive security package. My team can start as early as next week. Jonathan extended his hand. Consider it done. I'll have contracts sent over by Monday. After he left, Vanessa practically bounced into the conference room. We got it. Jonathan already texted his assistant to initiate the paperwork. Excellent work, I acknowledged, grateful for my team's professionalism despite the personal complications swirling beneath the surface. Back in my office, I called Eleanor to report our success. Well done, she commended. Now, about next steps with Michael, my colleague has prepared the cease and desist letter regarding the corporate espionage. We can serve it as early as Monday. I hesitated, considering the implications. Once that legal action was initiated, there would be no going back, no possibility of a quiet, dignified divorce. Do it, I decided. And Eleanor, make sure it's delivered to him at work. That's aggressive, she noted without judgment. So was stealing my company's proprietary information while moving his mistress into our home during my mother's funeral, I countered. Fair point. We'll proceed Monday morning. After hanging up, I stared out my office window at the city skyline, feeling a complex mix of emotions. There was a certain ruthlessness in my decision that I wouldn't have recognized in myself a week ago. But Michael's betrayal had changed me, forced me to develop harder edges to protect myself and my company with the same determination I'd once devoted to our partnership. My phone pinged with a text from Rebecca. Just got a courier delivery at the house. Legal paperwork from Michael's attorney. So he'd made his move. I wasn't surprised. Michael always believed in striking first, controlling the narrative, but this time he was operating with incomplete information. He had no idea what I'd discovered about his corporate espionage, no inkling of the legal tsunami heading his way. What does it say? I texted back. Lots of legal jargon, but basically demanding access to the house and joint accounts, plus some BS about how you're emotionally compromised due to Mom's death and acting irrationally. The familiar strategy of painting me as emotional while positioning himself as reasonable made me shake my head in disgust. Don't worry about it, I replied. Eleanor will handle everything. Want me to use it as kindling for a bonfire? Rebecca suggested, only half joking. Tempting, but no. Just leave it for me to review tonight. I worked late, ensuring everything was in order for the weekend. The cease and desist would be delivered to Michael first thing Monday morning at NextGen's office, a calculated move to maximize professional embarrassment. As I was shutting down my computer, an email notification caught my eye, a message from Jonathan Hayes with the subject line, confidential regarding M. Peterson. I opened it with a sense of foreboding. Olivia, I wanted to give you a heads up as a professional courtesy. Following our meeting today, I discovered Michael has been accessing our secure servers to download company information beyond his authorization level. Our IT team flagged unusual activity this afternoon. Given our new business relationship and Michael's connection to you, I felt you should be aware before we proceed with internal disciplinary measures on Monday. If you have insights that might be relevant, I'd appreciate a call this weekend. Regards, Jonathan Hayes. My heart raced as I reread the message. Michael wasn't just targeting WatchGuard, he was stealing from his own employer as well. The scope of his betrayal was expanding by the hour, painting a picture of a man spiraling into increasingly reckless behavior. I called Jonathan immediately, catching him as he was leaving his office. "Thank you for the warning," I said, skipping pleasantries. "I think we need to meet in person. There's more you should know." We arranged to meet for breakfast the following morning at a discreet hotel restaurant downtown. As I drove home, I felt strangely calm despite the escalating situation. The pieces were falling into place, creating a clearer picture of Michael's plans and his inevitable downfall. Rebecca had dinner waiting when I arrived, homing a simple pasta dish that reminded me of meals our mother used to make. "Thought you could use some comfort food," she explained, pouring wine for both of us. "Rough day?" "Illuminating," I corrected, filling her in on the developments with NextGen and Michael's apparent corporate theft from his own employer. "Jesus," Rebecca breathed. "What the hell is he thinking? It's like he's self-destructing." "Or desperate," I suggested, twirling pasta around my fork. "He's been building this elaborate exit strategy, but now that I caught him, everything's accelerating, like he's grabbing whatever he can before the house of cards collapses." Rebecca nodded. We ate in companionable silence for a while, the gravity of the situation settling around us. Finally, she spoke again. "You know, I always liked Michael. Thought he was good for you." "So did I admitted quietly. "But this," she gestured vaguely. "This isn't just a man having an affair. This is someone systematically trying to destroy everything you've built." I nodded, the truth of her words resonating deeply. "The question is, why? What changed?" Rebecca considered this. Maybe nothing changed. Maybe this is who he always was, and he just got better at hiding it. Or maybe he changed, and I didn't notice. I countered, the old guilt surfacing briefly before I pushed it away. Whatever Michael's motivations, they didn't justify his actions. After dinner, I reviewed the legal paperwork his attorney had sent. Eleanor had been right-having video. Evidence changed everything. His claims that I was emotionally compromised and acting irrationally would crumble in the face of footage showing him moving Victoria into our home during my mother's funeral. I forwarded scans of the documents to Eleanor with a brief note. "He's escalating, proceeding as planned." That night, I slept soundly for the first time in days, my path forward clear. The hidden truths were emerging, and with each revelation, my position strengthened while Michael's weakened. He had underestimated me catastrophically, assumed I would be too broken by grief and betrayal to fight back effectively. Tomorrow's meeting with Jonathan would be another piece falling into place, another step toward ensuring Michael faced the full consequences of his actions. As I drifted off to sleep, I thought about the security cameras that had captured his betrayal. The very technology I'd built my company around now serving as silent witnesses to his downfall. There was a certain poetic justice in that, I decided. Michael had forgotten the most basic rule of security. Someone is always watching. The hotel restaurant where I met Jonathan Hayes the next morning was discreetly upscale, quiet enough for sensitive conversations, but public enough to maintain professional boundaries. I arrived first, selecting a corner table with my back to the wall, a security habit I developed years ago. Jonathan arrived precisely on time, looking more casual than he had at our business meeting, but still impeccably put together. He greeted me with a firm handshake before settling across from me. "Thank you for meeting on such short notice," he said after we'd ordered coffee. "I realize this is an unusual situation." "Unusual doesn't begin to cover it," I replied with a wry smile. "But I appreciate your discretion." We made brief small talk until our coffees arrived. Then Jonathan leaned forward, his expression turning serious. "Our IT team completed their preliminary audit late last night," he began. "Michael has been accessing restricted servers for at least 6 months' financial data, client lists, proprietary code well beyond what he needs for his role." I nodded, unsurprised, but still disturbed by the confirmation. It aligns with what we've discovered at WatchGuard. He's been gathering our client information as well. Jonathan's eyebrows shot up. You've been investigating him too? Not initially, I explained, choosing my words carefully. We discovered the breach while performing routine security upgrades after. I hesitated, unsure how much personal information to share. After your separation, Jonathan supplied. So Michael had told them we were separated, another half-truth in his carefully constructed narrative. Something like that, I conceded. What I can tell you is that Michael appears to have been systematically gathering proprietary information from both companies. We've compiled substantial evidence, which I'd be willing to share if it would help your investigation. Jonathan looked troubled. Do you have any insight into his motivation? Industrial espionage, planning to go to a competitor? I considered how much to reveal. I believe he was planning to launch his own consulting business, using the combined expertise and client lists from both our companies as his foundation. Bold, Jonathan muttered. And incredibly illegal. The server interrupted to take our breakfast orders. Once she departed, Jonathan continued. Next Gen takes intellectual property theft extremely seriously. We'll be terminating Michael's employment on Monday and pursuing all available legal remedies. I nodded, appreciating his directness. WatchGuard will be serving him with cease and desist orders regarding our proprietary information at the same time. Jonathan looked surprised. Monday? 9 a.m.? We've arranged for delivery at your offices, actually. I apologized for not mentioning it sooner. It was already in motion before I received your email. A smile ghosted across his face. Coordinated strike. Efficient. We do specialize in security, I reminded him. We ate breakfast, discussing the technical details of Michael's data theft and potential collaboration between our legal teams. By the time we finished, we had a clear plan for information sharing and aligned strategy. There's one more thing, Jonathan said as we prepared to leave. I'm not sure if it's relevant, but Michael recently approached our CFO about a significant advance on his bonus. Claimed he had unexpected medical expenses for a family member. The lie made me go cold. While I had been actually dealing with my mother's medical bills and funeral arrangements, Michael had been using fictional medical emergencies to fund whatever he was planning next. When was this? I asked. About 3 weeks ago. He seemed desperate, which was unusual. Michael's always been financially stable. Another piece of the puzzle clicked into place. 3 weeks ago was when he'd convinced Victoria to quit her job and began planning their new life together. He'd needed cash to set their plan in motion. That's helpful information, I said, not elaborating further. Thank you. As we parted ways outside the restaurant, Jonathan stopped me with a gentle touch on my arm. Olivia, I don't know exactly what's happening between you and Michael personally, but if there's anything Next Gen can do to support you through this process, please let me know. The unexpected kindness caught me off guard. I appreciate that, Jonathan. And for what it's worth, he added, the Michael Peterson I've seen these past few months isn't the man I thought I knew. Whatever's going on with him, it's not a reflection on you. I nodded, strangely moved by his insight. Thank you. On the drive home, I called Eleanor to update her on the meeting with Jonathan. She was impressed with the developments. This is better than we could have hoped, she said. Coordinated legal action from both companies significantly strengthens our position. What should I expect on Monday? I asked. Drama, she replied bluntly. Once Michael is served at work and realizes Next Gen is moving against him simultaneously, he's likely to react strongly. Are you prepared for that? I thought about it honestly. Was I ready for Michael's wrath when he realized his carefully constructed exit strategy was collapsing around him? Yes, I decided. I've been dealing with his manipulation for months without knowing it. At least now I can face it head on. The rest of the weekend passed in a strange haze of anticipation. Rebecca and I spent Sunday at our mother's house, continuing the bittersweet task of sorting through her belongings. The grief felt different now, still raw but somehow cleaner than the complicated emotions surrounding Michael's betrayal. "What do you think Mom would say about all this?" Rebecca asked as we packed photo albums into storage boxes. I considered the question seriously. "She'd be furious with Michael," I said finally. "But she'd tell me not to let his actions define me." Rebecca nodded, a sad smile playing at her lips. "And she'd remind you that you're stronger than you think." That was her favorite line. "I wish she was here," I said, feeling a fresh wave of loss. "She is," Rebecca said simply, tapping my chest, "right where she always told us to find strength." Sunday evening, I prepared for the week ahead with methodical focus. I laid out my most confident outfit for Monday, tailored navy suit that had always made me feel powerful. I reviewed the cease and desist documentation one final time and checked in with Tony about additional security measures at the office. "We've revoked all of Michael's digital access," he confirmed. "And I've assigned 2 of our best people to monitor for any attempted breaches or unusual activity." "Thank you," I said. "And Tony, I appreciate everything you and the team have done this week. Above and beyond doesn't begin to cover it." "That's what family does," he replied simply. "No one messes with one of our own." His words stayed with me as I tried to sleep that night. Family. While Michael had been plotting to dismantle everything we'd built together, I had been surrounded by people who genuinely cared: my sister, my team at WatchGuard, even professional acquaintances like Jonathan Hayes. The contrast couldn't have been starker. Monday morning arrived bright and clear. I dressed carefully, applied my makeup with precision, and drove to the office earlier than usual, the calm before the storm. Vanessa met me in the lobby, coffee in hand. "Ready for today?" "As I'll ever be," I replied, accepting the cup. "Great," Tony briefed the security team. "We're prepared for any disruptions." I nodded, appreciating their foresight. Michael had always had a temper when cornered, and today he would be facing the collapse of his carefully constructed plans. At precisely 9:05 a.m., my phone rang. Eleanor. "The papers have been served," she reported. "Our courier confirmed delivery at NextGen's reception desk 5 minutes ago." I took a deep breath. Now, we wait. I didn't have to wait long. At 9:17, Michael's name flashed on my phone screen. I declined the call, following Eleanor's advice not to engage directly. Seconds later, a text appeared. "What the hell do you think you're doing? Call me immediately." I forwarded the message to Eleanor without responding and continued with my morning meetings. By 10:30, Michael had called 6 more times and sent a dozen increasingly angry texts. Each went unanswered. Each was documented for our case. Just before noon, Deborah buzzed my office. "Miss Morgan, Michael Peterson is in the lobby, demanding to see you. Security has intercepted him, but he's causing quite a scene." I closed my eyes briefly, centering myself. "Tell security to escort him out. If he refuses to leave, they should call the police." "Already done," she assured me. "Tony's handling it personally." I resisted the urge to watch the security feed to see Michael's face as he realized he couldn't bully his way into my company the way he'd bullied his way through our marriage. Instead, I focused on the contract documents from NextGen that had arrived that morning, a concrete symbol that my professional life would continue to thrive despite his attempts to undermine it. My phone buzzed with a text from Tony. "Situation resolved. MP removed from premises. Police not required but report filed." The brief message spoke volumes. Michael had been physically removed from WatchGuard, but had ultimately backed down rather than face police involvement. His self-preservation instinct was still functioning, at least. At 1:15, Eleanor called again. "Michael's attorney just reached out," she reported. "Apparently Michael returned to NextGen after leaving your office, only to find security clearing out his desk. They're suddenly very interested in discussing settlement terms." A surge of vindication washed over me. "What's our position?" "Strong and getting stronger," Eleanor replied. NextGen's legal team has reached out to coordinate on the intellectual property issues. They're taking an aggressive stance. What does that mean for Michael? Potentially criminal charges. Certainly civil liability. His career in this industry is effectively over. The finality of that statement hit me with unexpected force. Despite everything, there was a small part of me that still remembered the supportive partner Michael had once been the man who had helped me build my dreams in those early days. "Are you still comfortable proceeding?" Eleanor asked, sensing my hesitation. I thought about it for a moment, then replied with conviction. Yes, he made his choices. Now he can live with the consequences. By mid-afternoon, word had spread throughout the office that something significant was happening. I called an impromptu staff meeting to address the situation directly. As some of you may have noticed, there was an incident in the lobby this morning. I began once everyone was gathered. I want to be transparent with you all. WatchGuard has identified a security breach involving my husband, Michael Peterson. A murmur ran through the room. Surprise, concern, confusion. The situation is being handled through appropriate legal channels, I continued. Our client data remains secure, and we've taken all necessary steps to protect our systems and intellectual property. I paused, looking around at the team I'd built, professionals who deserved the truth. This is obviously personally difficult, but I want to assure everyone that WatchGuard's operations and future are not in jeopardy. In fact, we've just secured a major new contract with NextGen Technologies. The announcement was met with supportive nods and a few subtle thumbs up from my leadership team. I appreciate your discretion and focus during this challenging time, I concluded. If anyone has specific concerns, my door is always open. As the team dispersed, several lingered to offer quiet words of support or simply a reassuring touch on the shoulder. The sense of community was overwhelming after days of emotional isolation. By 5 p.m., my inbox held 3 more updates. Confirmation from NextGen that Michael's employment had been terminated effective immediately. Notification from our bank that Michael had attempted and failed to access our joint accounts, which I'd frozen on Eleanor's advice. And an email from Michael's attorney requesting an urgent settlement conference. The reversal was complete. In just 7 days, Michael had gone from celebrating his new beginning with Victoria in our home to losing his job, facing potential criminal charges, and scrambling to salvage what he could from the wreckage of his plans. As I drove home that evening, I felt a complex mixture of emotion, satisfaction that justice was being served, lingering grief for what I'd lost, and a growing sense of freedom as I looked toward the future. Rebecca was waiting when I arrived, a glass of wine already poured. "How did it go?" "It's over," I said simply, accepting the glass. Or at least, the beginning of the end. He finally realized who he was dealing with. Who was he dealing with? I wondered aloud. I keep trying to reconcile the Michael I married with the man who could do all this. Rebecca considered this. Maybe both versions are real. People contain multitudes, especially when their egos are threatened. His ego? My success threatened how he saw himself? Instead of growing with you, he chose to tear you down, she explained. Classic insecurity response. Her insight struck me as profound. Michael hadn't changed overnight. He'd gradually allowed his insecurities to poison what we'd built together. And when those insecurities threatened to consume him, he'd constructed an elaborate fantasy with Victorione, where he was the successful one, the desirable one, the one in control. "What happens now?" Rebecca asked, refilling our glasses. I thought about the question seriously. Legally, we proceed with the divorce and the intellectual property claims, personally. I paused, considering. I rebuild. I focus on WatchGuard, on honoring Mom's memory, on figuring out who Olivia Morgan is without Michael Peterson attached. "I like the sound of that," Rebecca said, raising her glass in a toast. "To Olivia Morgan, security expert and all-around badass." I clinked my glass against hers, a genuine smile forming for what felt like the first time in weeks to new beginnings. Later that night, alone in my office, I accessed the home security system one last time. The footage that had captured Michael's betrayal was safely preserved for legal purposes, but I no longer needed to watch it, to immerse myself in that moment of devastation. Instead, I initiated a new security protocol for the house, one that would erase all traces of Michael's access and create a fresh system keyed only to my biometrics. As I confirmed the changes, I felt a symbolic weight lifting from my shoulders. The reversal was complete. Michael had thought he held all the power that he could discard me and take what he wanted without consequences. He had underestimated me in every possible way, as a wife, as a businesswoman, as an adversary. That mistake had cost him everything, while I emerged stronger, clearer about who I was and what I deserved. My phone pinged with a final text from Michael for the day. "This isn't over. You'll regret this." I didn't bother responding or even forwarding it to Eleanor. His threats were as empty as his promises had been. He no longer had the power to hurt Minot because I didn't care, but because I finally saw him clearly, and in that clarity, I found freedom. The settlement conference was scheduled for Friday morning, exactly 1 week after the cease and desist orders had been served, and Michael's professional world had imploded. Eleanor suggested we meet at her office an hour beforehand to review our final strategy. "Michael's attorney has been flooding my inbox with settlement proposals," she explained as we sat in her elegant conference room, each one more desperate than the last. She laid out the progression of offers on the table between us. The initial one had been almost laughably one-sided, Michael demanding half of our joint assets, plus generous alimony based on his contribution to WatchGuard's success. He actually claimed he was entitled to company equity? I asked, incredulous. "Standard opening gambit," Eleanor assured me. "They always reach for the stars initially." The subsequent offers had grown progressively more realistic as Michael's position weakened. The latest version, delivered just yesterday, requested only his personal belongings from the house, his car, and a modest lump sum to restart his life. "Their tone has changed completely," Eleanor observed. "They're practically begging now." "What changed?" "Reality," she replied simply. NextGen's legal team shared their findings with the district attorney's office yesterday. Criminal charges for corporate espionage are now a very real possibility. I took a deep breath, absorbing this information. Part of me still struggled with the magnitude of consequences Michael was facing, consequences I had helped orchestrate. Eleanor studied me carefully. "Having second thoughts?" "Not exactly," I said slowly. "It's just, the Michael I thought I knew would never have risked this much." "People do desperate things when their self-image is threatened," Eleanor replied, echoing Rebecca's insight, "especially narcissistic personalities." "Do you think he's a narcissist?" Eleanor shrugged slightly. "I'm not a psychologist, but in my experience, individuals who can maintain elaborate deceptions while showing minimal remorse often exhibit narcissistic traits." She gathered her papers, refocusing on the immediate task. For today's meeting, I recommend we keep it brief and businesslike. No engaging with emotional appeals. No responding to accusations. We state our terms, period. I nodded, steeling myself. And those terms? Full divorce with no financial obligations on either side. You keep the house and watchguard, obviously. He keeps his personal belongings and vehicle. In exchange, we don't pursue additional civil damages for the corporate espionage. That seems lenient, I said, surprised. Eleanor gave me a knowing look. The criminal investigation will proceed regardless of our civil settlement. NextGen is quite determined, and they have an airtight case. Our leniency on civil damages costs us little, while giving us the moral high ground. Her strategic thinking impressed me once again. You're playing chess while he's playing checkers. Precisely. She agreed with a small smile. The goal isn't just to win, but to win so definitively that he can never challenge the outcome. Michael and his attorney were already waiting when we entered the conference room. The contrast between the Michael sitting there and the confident man I'd married was stark. His normally immaculate appearance had slipped, his suit slightly rumpled, dark circles under his eyes, hair less meticulously styled. He looked up when I entered, his expression a complicated mix of anger, fear, and something that might have been regret. I maintained a neutral expression as I took my seat opposite him, Eleanor settling beside me with quiet authority. Michael's attorney, a nervous-looking man named Gregory Walsh, opened the proceedings with forced pleasantry. Thank you all for meeting today. I believe we have the framework for an amicable resolution. Eleanor's raised eyebrow communicated her skepticism about the word amicable, but she simply nodded for him to continue. Walsh outlined their latest proposal, which matched what Eleanor had shown me earlier. Throughout his presentation, Michael remained silent, his eyes fixed on me with an intensity that once might have unnerved me. When Walsh finished, Eleanor calmly presented our counter-offer identical to theirs in the material terms, but with additional non-disclosure provisions preventing Michael from disparaging either me or WatchGuard publicly. These terms are acceptable, Walsh said quickly before Michael could interject. We'll have the paperwork drawn up immediately. My office will prepare the documents, Eleanor corrected smoothly. We'll send them for your review by Monday. Throughout this exchange, Michael remained conspicuously silent, a muscle working in his jaw as the attorneys discussed logistical details. He finally leaned forward. Olivia, he said quietly, his voice rougher than I remembered. Can we speak privately for a moment? Eleanor shot me a warning glance, but I had been anticipating this request. Anything you have to say can be said here, I replied evenly. Please, he insisted, an edge of desperation breaking through. 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking, after 12 years together. I considered refusing, following Eleanor's advice to avoid engagement, but there was a part of me that needed to hear whatever he thought would justify his actions. 5 minutes, I agreed, ignoring Eleanor's disapproving frown, in the atrium downstairs. The small garden atrium on the building's ground floor offered both privacy and security open enough that I wouldn't feel trapped but secluded enough for a genuine conversation. Michael arrived moments after I did, his footsteps hesitant as he approached the bench where I waited. Thank you, he said, remaining standing. I didn't think you'd agree to talk to me. I almost didn't, I replied honestly. What do you want, Michael? He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so familiar, it caused an unexpected pang of nostalgia. I want to explain. Explain what? How you systematically betrayed me. How you moved another woman into our home while I was burying my mother. How you stole proprietary information from my company. Which part needs explaining? The words came out sharper than I'd intended, the accumulated hurt finding its voice despite my determination to remain detached. Michael flinched. All of it. None of it, I don't know. He sank onto the bench beside me, careful to maintain distance between us. It all got so out of control. That's not an explanation, I pointed out. That's an excuse. You're right, he admitted, surprising me. I've been making excuses for months to Victoria, to myself. Telling myself that you were the problem, that you were too absorbed in your work, that you didn't need me anymore. I remained silent, letting him continue. The truth is uglier, he said after a moment. I was jealous of your success, your confidence, the respect people have for you. Somewhere along the way, I started seeing your achievements as a referendum on my failures. The raw honesty caught me off guard. It aligned so closely with Rebecca's assessment that it was startling to hear it from Michael himself. So you decided to punish me for succeeding? I asked, genuinely trying to understand. Not consciously. No. He shook his head. It started small resentment when you were featured in that business magazine. Irritation when people at parties asked about your company instead of my work. Then, I met Victoria. My stomach tightened at her name, but I kept my expression neutral. She looked at me like I was impressive, Michael continued, his voice hollow. She believed the stories I told about being an investment executive, about having a trust fund. With her, I could be the successful one. The provider, the protector. It was intoxicating. And the corporate espionage. Was that intoxicating too? He winced. That was pure desperation. Once I started living this double life, I needed a way to sustain it. The idea of starting my own consulting firm using your client connections seemed like the perfect solution. I convinced myself I deserved it, that it was compensation for supporting you in the early days of WatchGuard. The twisted logic would have been almost laughable if it weren't so destructive. You were planning to compete against me using information you stole from my company? I wasn't thinking clearly, he admitted. Once I started down that path, each step made the next one seem more reasonable. By the time I moved Victoria in, I was completely disconnected from reality. The day of my mother's funeral, I said. The hurt still raw. You couldn't even wait a day? Michael's face contorted with what appeared to be genuine shame. There's no excuse for that. She was pressuring me about when she could move in, and I saw an opportunity. I knew you'd be gone all day. He paused. It was cruel and calculated, and I'll regret it for the rest of my life. We sat in silence for a moment, the gravity of his admission hanging between us. Part of me appreciated his honesty, but it did nothing to mitigate the damage he'd caused. Why are you telling me this now? I finally asked. It doesn't change anything. I know. He looked down at his hands. I needed you to know that I recognize what I did, that I understand now how badly I betrayed not just our marriage but everything we built together. Is that supposed to make me feel better? No, he said quietly. Nothing I say can undo what I've done. But you deserve to hear the truth from me, at least once. I studied him, trying to reconcile this apparently remorseful man with the one who had so coldly dismissed me as a placeholder in his life. Could people truly contain such contradictions, or was this simply another performance? What happened with Victoria? I asked, curious despite myself. A bitter smile crossed his face. She left the night after you found us. Said she couldn't be with someone who would treat his wife the way I treated you. He paused. She was right. The irony was almost painful. The woman he'd chosen over me had recognized his character flaws more quickly than I had after 12 years of marriage. I've lost everything, Michael continued, his voice hollow. My job, my reputation, possibly my freedom if the criminal charges proceed, and I deserve it all. I stood up, having heard enough. His confession, while seemingly genuine, changed nothing about our circumstances or my resolve to move forward. Your 5 minutes are up, I said. The attorneys will handle everything from here." He nodded, not attempting to stop me. "For what it's worth, Olivia, I am sorry. Not just for getting caught, but for what I did to you, to us." I paused, considering my response carefully. "I believe you're sorry now," I said finally. "But it doesn't change what you did or who you revealed yourself to be. I hope you find a way to rebuild your life, Michael. Just do it far away from mine." As I walked away, I felt a weight lifting, not just the burden of anger I'd been carrying, but the lingering doubt about whether I'd somehow contributed to our marriage's destruction. Michael's confession had confirmed what I'd been coming to understand. His betrayal wasn't a response to anything I had done or failed to do. It was a reflection of his own insecurities and moral failings. Eleanor was waiting for me upstairs. "Everything okay?" she asked, concern evident in her expression. "Yes," I replied, surprised to find I meant it. "Everything is exactly as it should be." The anniversary of my mother's death arrived with gentle predictability, the calendar marking what my heart had been counting down to for weeks. Unlike the sharp, overwhelming grief of a year ago, today's sadness felt more manageable, a companion, rather than a dictator of my emotions. Rebecca and I had planned a simple remembrance, a visit to the cemetery in the morning followed by lunch at our mother's favorite restaurant. No grand gestures or elaborate memorials, just a quiet acknowledgement of her continued presence in our lives. "She would have hated anything fussy," Rebecca remarked as we placed fresh flowers on the grave. "Remember how she always said funerals should have better food and fewer speeches?" I smiled at the memory. "And more comfortable seating." She was very specific about that. We stood together in comfortable silence, the spring breeze carrying the scent of newly bloomed flowers across the cemetery. So much had changed since we had stood in this same spot a year ago, both of us different people now, shaped by loss and resilience in ways we couldn't have anticipated. "Do you ever think about him?" Rebecca asked suddenly, breaking our contemplation. She didn't need to specify who him was. Michael's absence in my life had become complete over the past year, with no contact beyond the necessary legal communications during the divorce proceedings. "Sometimes," I admitted. "Not in the way you might think, though. I don't miss him, or wonder what if. I mostly find myself puzzled by how someone I thought I knew so well could have been so different from who I believed them to be." Rebecca nodded thoughtfully. "The greatest magic trick isn't making something disappear. It's making someone believe they're seeing something that isn't really there." "When did you get so philosophical?" I teased, linking my arm through hers as we walked back to the car. "I have a wise older sister," she replied with a grin. "She taught me that going through hell doesn't define you, how you emerge from it does." At the restaurant, a cozy Italian place, where our mother had celebrated every birthday for the last decade of her life, we ordered her favorite dishes and shared stories that made us laugh through occasional tears. It felt right to remember her this way, through joy and connection rather than solely through grief. As we finished our meal, Rebecca raised her glass in a toast. "To Mom, who would be so proud of you." "Of both of us," I corrected, clinking my glass against hers. "True, but I didn't rebuild my entire life while simultaneously expanding my company and becoming the security consultant everyone's fighting to hire." She wasn't exaggerating much. The past year had seen WatchGuard grow exponentially, our client list expanding to include several Fortune 500 companies following the high-profile success of the next-gen tech contract. What had begun as a regional security firm was now recognized nationally, with inquiries coming in from across the country. "It wasn't a master plan," I reminded her, "just putting one foot in front of the other." "Well, those feet have covered some serious ground," Rebecca insisted. "You should be proud, Liv." I was proud, though it still felt strange to acknowledge it so directly. The professional success had been unexpected a silver lining to the dark cloud of personal betrayal. The next-gen contract had opened doors throughout the industry, with Jonathan Hayes becoming something of an unofficial ambassador for WatchGuard services. Jonathan. His name triggered a small smile. "You've got that look again," Rebecca observed, interrupting my thoughts. "What look?" "The thinking about Jonathan face." "I do not have a specific face for thinking about Jonathan," I protested, feeling a warmth in my cheeks that undermined my denial. "You absolutely do. It's subtle, but I'm your sister. I can read you like a book with very large print." I laughed, conceding the point. "Fine. Yes, I was thinking about him. He's taking me to the symphony tomorrow night." "Fancy," Rebecca teased. Quite the upgrade from Michael's idea of cultural entertainment, watching sports on mute while he explained the plays to you in exhaustive detail. "That's not fair," I found myself saying, surprising us both with my defense of Michael. He had his good qualities too, at least at the beginning. Rebecca's expression softened. "I know. That's why it hurt so much when he changed. Or when we finally saw who he really was." "I've been thinking about that lately," I admitted. "Whether he changed or whether I just didn't see him clearly. And I think it was both. The man I married wasn't entirely a fiction, but somewhere along the way, his insecurities poisoned whatever good was there. And now?" Rebecca asked gently. "Now I'm grateful," I said, the realization crystallizing as I spoke. Not for the betrayal or the pain, but for the clarity that came afterward. I know myself better now. I know what I deserve in my relationships. I know the warning signs to watch for. "And you found someone who passes all those tests," Rebecca observed. I smiled, thinking of Jonathan's steady integrity, his respect for my work, his unwavering support without a hint of resentment or competitiveness. It's early still, but yes, Jonathan is different. Different good? Different everything. He's secure in himself, proud of my success without trying to compete with it. When he looks at me, he actually sees me know some reflection of himself, or what I can do for him. "Plus, he's hot," Rebecca added, making me laugh. "There is that," I agreed. After lunch, we parted ways, Rebecca to meet friends, me to stop by the office briefly before heading home. It was Saturday, but the new West Coast client had a security question that couldn't wait until Monday. Walking through WatchGuard's weekend quiet offices, I felt a familiar pride in what we'd built. The company had nearly doubled in size over the past year, with new divisions focusing on specialized security needs for different industries. What Michael had intended as a devastating blow, stealing our client information, had instead catalyzed a complete security overhaul that had ultimately made us stronger and more competitive. In my office, I handled the client concerns efficiently, then paused to look at the framed photo on my desk, a new edition, taken 6 months ago at the company's anniversary celebration. It showed me surrounded by my leadership team, all of us smiling with genuine pride and camaraderie. There was no pretense in those smiles, no hidden agendas or festering resentments, just a group of professionals who respected each other, bound by a shared mission and mutual support. My phone pinged with a text from Jonathan. "Confirmed reservations for dinner before symphony tomorrow. Looking forward to seeing you." A simple message, but it carried a weight of sincerity that still felt novel after years of Michael's increasingly hollow communications. With Jonathan, what appeared on the surface was what existed beneath: no elaborate deceptions, no carefully constructed personas. As I drove home, I reflected on the symmetry of this day and year, since everything had fallen apart, yet here I was, more whole than I'd been even before the collapse. The grief of losing my mother would always remain a tender spot in my heart that time could soften, but never fully heal. But the wounds from Michael's betrayal had closed completely, leaving behind not scars but wisdom. At home, I walked through rooms that no longer held painful memories. I'd redecorated gradually over the past year, replacing furniture, repainting walls, transforming the space into something entirely mine. The bedroom where I'd found Victoria was now my peaceful sanctuary, no trace remaining of that devastating moment. The security cameras still maintained their vigilant watch throughout the house, but their meaning had evolved. No longer reminders of betrayal, they now represented protection, foresight, the importance of seeing clearly what's really happening around you. That evening, I sat on my back patio watching the sunset, a glass of wine in hand, reflecting on the journey of the past year. I had lost a mother and a husband within days of each other, losses that could have broken me completely. Instead, I had rebuilt, reclaimed, renewed. The security cameras that Michael had forgotten about had captured his betrayal in perfect, irrefutable detail. But they had captured something else too, the moment when my life split into before and after, the catalyst for a transformation I would never have chosen but now couldn't imagine living without. My phone buzzed with a final text from Rebecca for the day. "Love you, sis. Mom would be so proud." I smiled, typing back, "Love you too." And yes, I think she would. Setting down my phone, I raised my glass to the fading light, a private toast to endings and beginnings, to security systems and broken trust, to the unexpected ways life can fall apart and then reassemble into something stronger and more authentic than before. 6 months later, I found myself in my office late one evening, reviewing plans for WatchGuard's newest initiative, a security foundation focused on helping victims of domestic violence. The idea had come to me gradually over the past year, growing from my own experience with betrayal and manipulation. What had begun as a personal healing journey had evolved into something larger, a mission to use my expertise to help others who faced similar or worse situations. WatchGuard would provide security systems and monitoring services at reduced or no cost to shelters and individuals escaping unsafe relationships. "Still working?" Jonathan asked from the doorway, jacket in hand, ready to head home after our quarterly planning session. We had been dating for nearly 9 months now, our relationship progressing with a comfortable pace that respected both our busy lives and our previous wounds. "Just finishing up," I replied, smiling as he crossed the room to glance at my computer screen. "The Catherine Morgan Foundation," he read aloud, nodding appreciatively. "Your mother would be honored." "I hope so," I said, saving the document and shutting down my computer. It feels right taking something painful and transforming it into something that might help others. Jonathan nodded, understanding without needing further explanation. That was one of the many things I valued about him. His ability to grasp the deeper currents of my thoughts without requiring every detail spelled out. As we walked to the elevator together, I found myself reflecting on how different this relationship felt from my marriage to Michael. With Jonathan, there was a genuine partnership, two strong individuals, choosing to stand beside each other rather than one trying to overshadow or control the other. "Any news on the Portland expansion?" he asked, as we rode the elevator down to the parking garage. "Closing next week," I replied. "We'll be operational by the end of the quarter." "Impressive timeline. We have a good team." Jonathan smiled, taking my hand as we exited the elevator. "Led by an exceptional CEO. The simple compliment, delivered without jealousy or hidden resentment, still felt refreshing after years of Michael's increasingly backhanded praise. "Have you heard anything more about Michael?" Jonathan asked carefully as we reached our cars. He rarely brought up my ex-husband, understanding it was a closed chapter, but occasionally checked in when professional matters might intersect. "Eleanor mentioned he's moved to Seattle," I said. "Apparently working for a small tech startup, nothing in security or consulting." The criminal charges against Michael had ultimately been resolved through a plea agreement, no jail time but substantial financial penalties and professional restrictions that effectively barred him from working in our industry again. I had felt a complex mix of emotions when Eleanor informed me of the plea deal relief, that the legal ordeal was over, a touch of sadness for the man Michael might have been in another life, but mostly a quiet satisfaction that justice had been served without destruction on either side. "Are you okay with that?" Jonathan asked, studying my face for any sign of lingering pain. I considered the question seriously. "Yes," I said finally. "I hope he finds whatever he needs there. Just far away from here." Jonathan nodded, understanding that my response wasn't about forgiveness so much as release, letting go of both anger and attachment to focus on the life I was building now. "See you at home?" he asked. We had started spending most nights together, either at my house or his downtown loft, though we maintained separate residence as a boundary. I had insisted on that, Jonathan, respected without question. "I'll be there in an hour," I promised. "Just need to stop by the shelter first to check on the new system installation." He leaned in for a brief kiss. "Drive safe." As I watched him walk to his car, I felt a wave of gratitude for this unexpected new chapter, for a relationship built on mutual respect and genuine admiration rather than dependency or control. The women's shelter was quiet when I arrived, most residents already settled in their rooms for the evening. Maria, the night manager, greeted me at the security desk. "Everything's working perfectly, Miss Morgan," she reported, gesturing to the new monitoring system WatchGuard had installed the previous week. "The staff already feel safer, and the women, well, many of them are sleeping through the night for the first time in months, knowing someone's watching over the building." I nodded, scanning the security feeds on the monitors. The cameras covered every entrance and common area, while carefully avoiding private spaces designed to protect without invading privacy. "And the panic buttons?" "Tested and operational in every room," Maria confirmed. "Though we haven't needed them, thank goodness." As we finished our inspection tour, a woman emerged from one of the counseling rooms, her eyes red from crying but her posture straighter than when I'd seen her last week. She stopped when she saw me, recognition flickering across her face. "You're the security lady," she said quietly, "the one who put in the cameras?" I nodded. "Olivia Morgan. How are you settling in, miss?" "Diane," she supplied. "Better. I actually slept last night." She hesitated, then added, "My husband, ex-husband, he always knew how to find me before. No matter where I went, he'd show up. But the counselor showed me how the system works, how no one gets in without being seen." "That's exactly what it's designed for," I said gently. She nodded, twisting her hands together nervously. "I just wanted to say thank you for seeing us, for making us visible in the right way, you know?" Her words hit me with unexpected force. Visible in the right way. Wasn't that what we all wanted? To be truly seen for who we are, not as projections of someone else's desires or insecurities? "You're welcome, Diane," I replied. "And if you ever need anything, the staff has my direct number." After completing the security check and saying goodnight to Maria, I sat in my car for a moment, reflecting on Diane's words. 1 year ago, Michael's betrayal had made me feel invisible, as if the woman he had married could be so easily erased and replaced. Now, I was using that painful experience to help others become visible in ways that protected rather than exposed them. The Catherine Morgan Foundation had started as a way to honor my mother and heal my own wounds, but it was growing into something more significant, a force for change in the lives of vulnerable women across the city. When I arrived at Jonathan's loft, I found him on the balcony, 2 glasses of wine already poured, soft jazz playing in the background. The Portland skyline sparkled before us, lights reflecting on the river below. "How was the shelter?" he asked as I joined him, handing me a glass. "Good. The system's working well." I leaned against the railing beside him, letting the peaceful scene wash over me. I met one of the residents, Diane. She said something that stuck with me, about being visible in the right way. Jonathan nodded, understanding immediately. That's really what your security systems do, isn't it? Make the invisible visible, threats, vulnerabilities, but also strengths and solutions. I never thought of it quite that way, I admitted. But yes, it's about seeing clearly not just physical threats, but the dynamics that create them. We stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the city lights. "I have something for you," Jonathan said finally, reaching into his pocket. "It's not a ring," he added quickly, seeing my momentary hesitation. "I know we're not there yet." He handed me a small velvet box. Inside lay a delicate silver pendant in the shape of a key, inlaid with tiny sapphires that caught the light. "It's beautiful," I said, lifting it from the box. "It's symbolic," he explained. "Not just because of your work in security. When we met, you were just starting to unlock a different version of yourself after everything that happened. I've watched you transform over this past year, not into someone new, but into a more authentic version of who you've always been. Stronger, clearer, more determined." I blinked back unexpected tears, touched by his perception. That might be the most thoughtful gift I've ever received. He took the necklace, helping me clasp it around my neck. "You've built something remarkable, Olivia, not just with WatchGuard or the Foundation, but with your life. You took betrayal and turned it into wisdom. Not everyone can do that." As we stood there on the balcony, the weight of the pendant resting against my collarbone, I thought about the journey of the past year. The security cameras that had revealed Michael's betrayal had done more than expose a lie. They had initiated a cascade of truth that had ultimately set me free. "You know," I said thoughtfully, "a year ago, I thought those security cameras had captured the worst moment of my life. Now I realize they documented the beginning of something better, something more authentic than what came before." Jonathan slipped his arm around my waist, and we stood together, looking out at the city spread before us. "To seeing clearly," he said, raising his glass. I smiled, touching my glass to his. To seeing clearly, and to being seen. Later that night, as Jonathan slept beside me, I found myself thinking about the women at the shelter, each with her own story of betrayal and courage, and about my mother, whose strength had helped me find my own. I thought about Victoria, who had chosen integrity over comfort when confronted with the truth, and about my team at WatchGuard, who had stood by me through the darkest days. All these threads woven together into the fabric of my life, stronger now for having been tested, more vibrant for the contrast between shadow and light. The security camera in the corner of Jonathan's bedroom caught my attention, its small red light a steady presence in the darkness. Unlike the ones in my home that had witnessed betrayal, this one represented something different: protection freely chosen, boundaries respectfully maintained, trust thoughtfully extended. 1 year ago, while I stood at my mother's grave, my husband had moved his mistress into our home, never suspecting that the very security system he ignored would expose his deception. He had forgotten, or perhaps never truly understood, that I owned the security company that monitored our house. That oversight had cost him everything, and it had given me myself clear-eyed, resilient, and finally, truly visible.